Well, hello there, and welcome to episode 35 of the podcast, Jump into Success. All right, let's go. Alrighty. Welcome to episode 35. It's been a while. Sorry about the gap in between. We've just been so super busy here at the college, launching our digital credentials, our new CPD program, etc., etc. Loads and loads of things happening here, which is very, very good, but also not so good because it doesn't allow me to get the episodes that, in fact, we've got recorded already up on the platform. Now, today, we've got a very, 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 and I emphasize the very special guest that we are be sharing, guest interview that we're sharing with you, none other than Mr. Robert Dilts. And the video of the recording is on UKCPD-TV on the website. You can check that out. But we thought we would put it out as a podcast as well because a few people asked. And also because I know a lot of people just listen to things. They don't always want to watch videos. They like to have podcasts on in the background. Now, Robert is highly influential in the world of NLP, coaching, leadership development, and so on. I always put him down as my friend and mentor because he was key to the college starting 26 years ago. I mean, he was the one who really encouraged me to go and do it, and especially through the success factor modeling training that I did with him and his brother John, really did form the basis of what became UK College of Personal Development. So this is quite a long podcast, so apologies. I was going to split it in two, and I thought I won't. I just put it all out in one go. You can always pause and come back to it at another time. So here it is, Robert Dilts. Enjoy the podcast. Okay, Robert Dilts, welcome to you. How are you today?
I am doing just fabulous, even better now that I'm talking to you.
You say the sweetest things.
This is the highlight of my day.
All right. Well, that's good to hear, although I don't believe you, but fine. Now, Robert, it's 50 years of NLP coming up. And I know you've just had a birthday as well, a reasonably significant one.
Yes.
Which is, yes. Yeah, I had the 6-0 a couple of months ago, so that was pretty scary. So for many, and I don't want to just kind of fawn over you, but for many, you are hugely influential, a living legend. Your work has influenced many, many, many people, including myself hugely. I mean, I've said before to a lot of people, without your influence, I don't think the college, UKCPD, would exist. Because it was the success factor modeling stuff that I thought, actually, I can do this. I'll just follow the recipe that Robert has given me. And, years later, here we are. And, and then the pandemic came along, which made us go online. So not just be stuck in Swindon. And I was really against that. I just thought this is not going to be great. But actually, it's transpired to be a blessing.
Yeah. I mean, I had the same as you, Tony. I was like, okay, these things I could, never do this online. And then we had to, and I discovered actually there's even some benefits.
There are. Yeah, there are. So, certainly, geographically, I'm no longer stuck in Swindon or the surrounding areas, where we used to have I don't even live in Swindon anymore. We moved down to Somerset by the coast because we always wanted to be near the coast.
Well, I remember your place. It was
you came there, which was fantastic. Yeah, it was fantastic. But we now have students everywhere, or not just in the UK, other countries, France, Germany, the Far East. The United States, shock horror. Yeah. So it's a good thing. Right, let's get stuck into these questions. Now, most of these questions have come from our members.
Okay, all right. I'm
hopefully they're okay. So let's start off. So, Robert, you're synonymous with the development of NLP.
Yes.
Can you share a little bit about your early influences and what drew you to the field of human development, possibly NLP?
Well, yeah, so it was, 50 years ago. I walked into, I was at the University of California at Santa Cruz, and I started there as an art major, and then I shifted to physics in the second year. I kind of went from right brain to left brain. I didn't know about it at the time.
Yeah.
Then I actually switched to politics, and so I was searching. and I thought as part of studying politics, I should learn something about language and linguistics. So I walked into this introduction to linguistics class, and John Grinder was professor, and he and Richard Bandler had just finished writing their first book, The Structure of Magic, Volume 1. And I remember it was like, I don't know, it was one of the early, like second or third day of class, John started teaching us these patterns. And it was sort of the first useful thing I'd ever learned in school. I realized, just by listening to things that people said and asking questions, I was able to sort of make these, help them make these transformational shifts.
Yeah.
And insights and understandings. So that really attracted me. Because I was generally interested in change and in doing something to make a better world. I mean, that was also the time. This was early 1970s, so it was, and I grew up in the Silicon Valley. So, it was actually before it was the Silicon Valley, but there was. I mean, I'm a contemporary of Steve Jobs. I think he's like, we're 1 month apart. So there was this kind of mindset in general back then in San Francisco Bay Area. And so, that got me interested. And of course, I started studying more with Bandler and Grinder. They were starting to run their meta groups up in the Santa Cruz Mountains. And so I started going to those. Of course, they were studying Milton Erickson. I took a class with Gregory Bateson. And so this all just sort of was a sort of a convergence, if you will, of these different factors and influences. And that, got me started in this whole area of personal development. So I would say that probably, the main early influences besides, Bandler and Grinder were the people that they studied, who were Milton Erickson, Virginia Satir. Fritz Perls was no longer alive by then, but, Gregory Bateson, and, just got very much that whole area, and then kind of following the path of developing NLP sort of took it from there.
Yeah. Wow. Fantastic. Yeah. So the next question is kind of, and so I guess you've kind of answered it in a way, but I'll ask the question. So how did your collaboration with figures, with Richard and John, help your understanding of personal transformation is the question. Yeah. Because, and if I put some context to this question, because I always say when we're talking about the development of NLP, yes, John and Richard, of course, but without Gregory Bateson would that have happened? Right. And then, of course, your huge influence that came along with, this is really interesting, but I can make more of it. This is my interpretation. Because if we look at all the people who've done the most research, published the most work, I mean, it's clearly you. So how do you think that sort of changed something in your head? You've obviously said, I went to do art, then politics, and then here I am doing human transformation. It's kind of...
Well, the thing that struck me about the Structure of Magic 1, and I think this really, hooked me, was this notion that, first of all, they said, look, when people change, so they were studying therapists. Back then, that wasn't really coaching as we have it today. That didn't really develop until the later 70s, 80s. But what they said is that, when people change, first of all, they said, all of these therapeutic methods, we could say coaching methods, any kind of personal transformation methods, they all work for some people. So they said, well, rather than look at the method, let's look at what happens when it works. And what they said is, when it works, something happens inside that person, which is that somehow their map of the world becomes enriched. And they have more choices. And so that seemed to me to be the sort of underlying, the sort of the deep structure of transformation, which was anything that can help people to expand their map of the world. And there are many, many different modalities to do that. So, that got me interested. And of course, because Bandler and Grinder really emphasized this notion of modeling, we were sort of raised as modelers, because you have to realize back then, when I got started, there was the Structure of Magic, right? There was no there were no NLP
No
techniques.
training manuals, just the structure of magic.
There was no anchoring, there was no reframing, there was no eye accessing cues yet, et cetera, et cetera. Those were all things that came from this really curious, and interested mindset of exploration of really trying to deeply understand people, how they work. I think in many ways, I would say that NLP was probably beginning of, one of the cognitive psychology revolution. Was really wanting to understand how this works. And like I said, while Bandler and Grinder were developing NLP, just over the hill, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak were, developing the personal computer. And there was definitely, the programming part of NLP is definitely like, your personal computer, learn how to use it. So I guess I think, and then of course there was collaborations with other people. Obviously Judith Delosier has been, we've collaborated all of those years. Leslie Cameron LeBeau, David Gordon, Steve Gilligan, who I'm still collaborating with. So I'm still collaborating with someone back then. And I think that one other thing, maybe Tony, that fits in there is that I think what Bandler and Grinder sort of modeled to us was was collaboration. And one of my first early teaching partners, Todd Epstein, who co-founded the NLP University with me, he got into it from being a musician. And he used to say that NLP was actually originally written as a duet, not a solo. Because when we first were doing trainings, we never actually even thought of training by ourselves. You always had a partner. And so I think there was kind of this model of collaboration in the beginning, which then ended up, of course, falling apart later. But there was definitely this sort of collaborative mindset and this whole notion of mutual exploration. And it was very much this sense of exploration, and that we were, discovering these things that were going to change the world. I mean, that sounded like I know it seems, I don't know, maybe far-fetched, but that's what was going on. Jobs and Wozniak, we're going to change the world. We're going to change the world. And that was just that was sort of the field, if you will, back then. So I think that's kind of, how do I say, again, part of this convergence of different factors.
Mm-hmm. Well, this question surprised me. I hope it's okay to ask you this. So in your book, you don't have the question yet. So in your book, Beliefs, Pathways to Health and Wellbeing, which actually is one of my favorite of your books, you mentioned your mother's illness.
Yes.
How did that affect you and then the work you went on to do? Because that seemed to me as well, I mean, I can't remember which student asked this, but it seemed to me that your focus of NLP and what it could probably do got bigger.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think this is a great question. I have no problem with that question. I think, first of all, that, up until that time, I had been really focused on the notion of cognitive strategies. And if you look at NLP Volume 1, it's essentially only about this sort of level of what I would call today capability level, cognitive strategies.
Yeah.
And I think that it was the sort of work with my mother that really got me, how do I say, really engaged with the whole area of belief. So not just strategies, but beliefs, and how impactful beliefs were and could be. Because, the situation with my mom was that she was given this, it was a recurrence of metastatic breast cancer, and was stage 4, so it had metastasized to not only to her other breast, but to her ovaries, her bladder, and pretty much into the bone marrow of every bone in her body. Wow. So there's no stage 5, right? The stage 4 is, 5 is you die. And again, this is where the whole notion of belief comes in. And the belief was, okay, first of all, this had all happened, this metastasis had all happened in a very quick period. And so the belief was, look at how fast this has metastasized, looking at this, predicting from here, first of all, they were saying there's not really anything we can do. We can't treat you because it would kill you. The treatments would kill you. we'll do our best to, keep you comfortable, sort of thing.
Sure, yeah.
And and so the whole thing was, I thought, all right, let's see. Who knows, but maybe NLP can be helpful. So I didn't know what way, but I think it could be helpful. And so we started just looking at, typical NLP questions. What's your goal? What do you want? The very first answer that my mom gave was, well, I don't have a future, and I don't want to build false hope, kind of thing. So now right away, you can't start using, right? You can't use strategies, right? Because you come right up against a belief.
Yeah.
And so I started realizing, oh, okay, that's interesting. Let's start looking at, well, maybe it doesn't, who knows how long you'll live, but how would you want to, whether it's whatever, 2 weeks, 2 days, 2 years, whatever, how, and then that started another process where we could start to actually begin to look at this future. And then a lot of sort of conflicts began to come up. And that made me also realize, oh yeah, so she would look at, sort of look at this kind of conflicts between herself, doing things for herself and doing things for others. My mother was a nurse, and she'd, and she raised 5 kids. She devoted her life to taking care of other people, and felt like that doing things for herself was some sort of selfish, narcissistic.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, wow, but once again, these were not cognitive strategies. These are all coming out as these beliefs and
Deeper beliefs.
yeah. So, and then not only that, when she started kind of getting the sense of this new possibility in her life, this other really strong, how do I say, interference came up, in that my mother's mother and her older sister had both died of metastatic breast cancer. And there was almost this feeling, it was not rational, but there was this belief that in order to be loyal to them, she had to, do the same thing. And I remember a very key moment there was, acknowledging, that belief in the value of loyalty, but then saying, but I noticed that you're only looking back, your history. If you look forward to your future to see your daughter, my sister, is looking at you the way you're looking at your mother, do you want her to be loyal to you by dying of breast cancer? And of course she said, no, never. Of course I wouldn't. So that's interesting. You're modeling to her, what you observe from your mother. What is it that you want to model? What would you want to pass down? And that really created this, big shift in her. And I began to realize, wow, what was interesting about that, it was like literally in like 1 second, everything was different, right? The thing that had been this thing that had been the obstacle, this resistance, suddenly became one of the biggest motivations to actually make change. So I guess what I'm saying is how that changed me was, first of all, so one of the things I like to say is that I had to go through, of course, my own very, how would I say, very clear and strong inner, inner examination of why I was doing it. Am I doing it for her, for me? Can I actually, I think oftentimes people get trapped in this thing that, I've got to be the savior, or I've got to be the good son or the good boy.
Yeah.
Really look and make sure that wasn't my motivation, because I knew that would taint it. And so and actually we would even go to these places in the house where we wouldn't normally go, so that we would have this in those moments. I was not the son anymore. I was a coach. She was the client. So that we left that, then, we could really sort that out. And I learned a lot about that, that I could actually, how to say, coach people that you care about. And that also taught me, though, I could also care about the people that I coached,
Yeah.
Like family members. So it was, I would say, it was definitely an important and pivotal experience. And of course, the result was, remarkable. And
Yeah.
so it taught me a lot, of course, very close up about, change and about what makes change and how to support it. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it resonated with me so much coming from my background, Holy Catholic Ireland and a PhD in guilt. Hang on a second. What do you really believe here? Are you really going to burn in hell forever? I'm not sure about that now. And it was quite liberating. And I remember looking at the book thinking, well, I've changed already. And that it was almost magical. Right, let's get on. We'll be here all day.
I was raised Catholic too, so no wonder we.
Yeah, we'll compare notes afterwards.
And my I'm half Irish. My mother was Irish.
Yeah. Same as me. Yeah. Same as me. Mother was Irish. My dad is UK from Swindon. That's how I ended up in Swindon. Right, section 2, NLP. So NLP has gone through many iterations since the 70s. And I think I know the answer to this. But what do you see as its core essence that remains really relevant today?
Well, I think, obviously, kind of even what I was saying about the beginning of Structure of Magic, this whole notion that we create a map or a model of the world that has deletion, distortion, generalization. That map, I think, there are different levels of this map, we could say. There are different aspects of the map. Some, relating to beliefs, others relating to these sort of cognitive strategies. But I think the essence of NLP is that by being able to, have greater self-awareness and, be able to generate more, other perspectives, more choices, that's not only how we heal, but that's also how we grow and are generative. So, and then that relates to, I think all of NLP still relates to the sort of, neuro-linguistic programming aspect that all of this happens. Well, it's expressed through language, not only spoken verbal language, but body language and other forms of language, and how that impacts our nervous system. I think that's going to be, that's what makes anything NLP is that. Yeah. And then looking for, what are those differences that make the difference? So I think modeling is the other sort of core that's stayed the same. Do you agree? Right. Was that what you were going to say?
Yes. Well, my biggest answer was modeling. It's about what works, not exactly just having theories for the sake of a theory.
Exactly.
Because when I did my psychotherapy training, I remember thinking, yeah, but I'm not sure about this because there's no actual proof that this works ever. And it's just modeling on disaster rather than success. So it didn't really work for me. But there we go. That's why I packed it up. I became an NLP trainer instead. So the next question is linked to that. A lot of debate about the scientific basis of NLP.
Yeah.
How do you respond to the criticism and yet still champion its applications? I mean, I've got a very complicated answer, but I'm guessing you might have a better one than me.
Well, I mean, first thing is that there actually has been lots of research done on NLP.
Exactly.
Right now, I mean, I was just talking with somebody who's, they're just raised $20 million to do more research on NLP and PTSD. So they don't calling it NLP. They call it reconstruction of traumatic memories, but it's completely NLP based. All the people that designed it were NLP. So I mean, and even the things that I've developed, like the spelling strategy, have been researched. So I think that the key is, it's if you can get some well-defined outcome studies, which are, because NLP is outcome oriented.
Exactly.
Because otherwise I think you have these tricky things, like what is it that you're trying to research about NLP? Things like eye movements are tricky because it depends upon the person's primary representational system. It depends on a lot of things, how you ask the question, what the context is. So it's not, I mean, trying to get some of these basics is tricky. But I think that when you get a well-defined outcome, NLP is shown to work as well as any other thing. In fact, with this post-PTSD research, it works better than any of the other methodologies.
Yeah. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, I always say when people ask me, there is plenty of research, but you have to look for the very specific thing you want to prove or disprove. Right, that's what you're into. But more importantly, I'm going to demonstrate to you that it works. I'll take 5 minutes and I'll show you. So that, you know, that's kind of more.
Right, right. You know, it's
Okay, let's quickly ask this one then. What
okay.
NLP technique or model do you feel is most misunderstood and might deserve more attention?
Which NLP technique or model is most misunderstood? That is an interesting question. Well, you know, if I think of my own, you know, the sleight of mouth is an interesting one because I think people tend to think, you know, they tend to think of it as being something that's primarily to be used in argumentation, and that actually, you know, and I think one of the most misunderstood things about a lot of NLP techniques is the sort of manipulation aspect.
Yeah, sure.
And so I think that that's where it has to be really contextualized, that, you know, the way that you use it is again always in the service of helping to expand somebody's map of the world, not to try to take advantage of them.
Yeah.
One of the biggest challenges with NLP in general, right, is that its strength is, you know, it's a double-edged sword, right? Its strength is also its weakness. In France, they say it, you know, you have the faults of your qualities. You know, it's very specific, it's very practical, it's tool oriented. But like any tool, you can use it to help somebody or to or to hurt somebody, right? You can take a hammer and build them a house, or hit them on the head, or, you know, but same with a knife. I think as Freud said, if the knife doesn't cut, neither will it serve the surgeon. I mean, so you've got these things, and
Yeah.
I think that a lot of NLP, you know, I see it being, you know, you see it being. I remember there was a film not that long ago, the Kingsman or something, where these kids are using it to, you know, they're basically using it to pick up, you know, people, you know, seduction. It's like, well,
Yeah.
that's, you know, I think those are sometimes the, what would you say, you know, it's like, those are the things that get press, but that's not really how NLP is taught and used by, you know, the vast majority of the
Sure.
trainers and around the world. So
Yeah, when people say that to me, I always say, well, it's like anything really. You can have nuclear power and power your cities and have hospitals and street lighting, or you can vaporize people on the other side of the world.
yes,
Really is down to what you want to do and what's your motivation. So, you know, you're going to do
exactly.
right. Now, the next section is around coaching. So you've made significant contributions in the field of coaching. And this is one of my questions, actually, I'm thinking of generative coaching, which
Yeah.
I've read some of your stuff on that. How would you define the difference between traditional coaching, which I'm going to maybe grow model or something, and Stephen's generative
Right.
approach?
Right. So we usually like to say, you know, that if you look at sort of the first personal change methodologies, all were coming out of psychotherapy, and psychotherapy, we said it has this approach where it's a bit more. My wife criticizes me for this because says I'm overgeneralizing, but, you know, you would say the therapist is viewing the person as having a problem. The therapist has the answer or the tool. It's kind of a more authoritarian. So it's past oriented, problem oriented, and, you know,
I'm going to fix you.
yeah, I'm going to fix you.
Type of approach.
Then you have traditional coaching, which is, okay, it's only, so you don't look at the past, you look at the future. It's outcome oriented, and the client has all the answers. The coach doesn't have the answers, so the coach is asking the questions, which is great. With generative coaching, we actually say we're looking at both past and the future. We say that actually obstacles can be transformed into resources, so we don't look at them as a problem. We say that the answers don't come from either the coach or the client. They come through the interaction, you know, through this. That's the idea of something generative. You know, 1 + 1 starts making more than 2. Hydrogen and oxygen make water, you know, so there's some, you know, people, you will have thoughts, things will come to you that you wouldn't by yourself. So it's through this interaction that something generative occurs. And of course, the key, we say several of the keys there are: number one, in traditional coaching, you have a very specific outcome, like a SMART goal. In generative coaching, you're creating something that's never existed before, so you don't even know what it's going to. You can't even be sure what it's going to look like. So you don't actually have you can't actually have a destination, but you have a direction. So what we call an intention versus a specific goal or an outcome. Secondly, there's the importance of what we call the generative state, which is, okay, if, the state of the person is going to determine the quality of what is arrived at or comes through the coaching relationship. So in certain states, nothing happens. What we call crash states, basically things just get worse. In what we call a coach state, which is an acronym for being centered and alert, that then we say you're sort of like your channel is open, and we would say in these in these crash states, we'll call them, what you say makes no difference, what you think makes no difference, what you do makes no difference, because it's kind of like falling on deaf ears. In coach states and these generative states, what you say is magic, what you think is magic, what you do is magic. Could be exactly the same things. So we're looking less at the contents than the way that they're being, experienced, expressed. And then as I was saying, in generative change, so we say we're looking both to the past and the future. The answer is not coming from one or the other. It's coming from the interaction between both. You have this generative state. And then we treat obstacles as not as problems or interferences. I think there's I think it's a Zen saying that obstacles are not in the way, they are the way. So the obstacle is actually something that's
pointing you in that direction.
Yeah. And even Milton Erickson used to say, the symptoms are solutions. They're attempts at solutions. So, but they're kind of these attempts that have gotten, distorted in some way. So we actually welcome the obstacles. We don't try to avoid them or to go around them or to, fix them. We sort of use this metaphor of Aikido. You're sort of, in NLP, you call it pacing and leading, right? You're embracing it in a way, and then finding the positive intention, and then all that energy becomes available to you. I'm currently working on my Strategies of Genius Volume 4, which is Milton Erickson, Gregory Bateson, Moshe Feldenkrais, and Gabriel Roth, who is the creator of the 5 Rhythms. And these were all the geniuses that are geniuses of personal transformation. And they're all geniuses that I knew, that I had the opportunity to.
Firsthand experience.
Yeah. So the reason I'm thinking of that in this moment is because I'm really, I just was finishing the chapter on Erickson, and it's just so clear, this kind of Aikido-ish thing that he does, which is really always, never trying to get rid of the symptom. He's actually much more likely to prescribe it than anything else. But certainly, this kind of idea of pacing and leading, utilization is also they call it. Yeah. So I guess
I'll be looking forward to the book then.
Yes, it's
coming soon to a shop near you.
Trying to have it out before the 50th anniversary event.
All right.
We'll see.
Alrighty. Right, we've got to get on. What key skills or mindsets do you think the leaders of today need to develop to thrive in a world that's becoming more complex and often uncertain for whatever reason? Let's not get into the reason.
Yes. Well, I've actually have written now 3 different books on leadership. And the latest one was on conscious leadership and resilience, which we say is about orchestrating evolution and fitness for the future. So I think those give some clues about where I think the leader's mindset should be. I think that what we mean by the consciousness of a conscious leader has to do with this notion of what Arthur Kessler coined this term holon, and Ken Wilber has also taken on that in his integral studies. But the notion of holon is that we are, each of us individually, is we're whole, but we're made up of other parts, both physical and psychologically, and we're part of greater wholes. We're part of families, we're part of professional communities, we're part of the global culture, cultures and global system. And usually, and I think this even coming back to this idea of symptoms, usually what happens is that because, and I think this is important for leaders, you bring your focus to something, and so that focus is on a certain part of the overall whole on, right? And what happens though is that if you begin to how would I say benefit the one part at the neglect of others, you will have predictable problems, right? So if I am just focusing on my business, right, business, and I'm neglecting my family and neglecting my health, and I'm neglecting the environment, what? I'm going to start having health problems, relationship problems, and environment problems. So the idea then of this sort of notion of conscious leader is I've got to be able to somehow keep this bigger whole on in my awareness. Now this is practically impossible to do, or I think it is impossible to do with our cognitive, conscious, verbal, rational mind. So that's one of the big challenges. Most business schools and things you're taught these linear, rational, logical things. And of course, they create problems. This is the old thing, the solution to the problem creates other problems. So one of the things that we emphasize in this book on conscious leadership is, first of all, this notion of being able to engage multiple intelligences. So you need more than just the rational cognitive, intelligence. You need emotional intelligence, but you also need what people might call intuition, what Milton Erickson might call the creative unconscious. But I need intelligences. I need to engage intelligences beyond my cognitive mind, and then of course that also means what I would call collective intelligence. So the old days of the leader who is the individual mastermind, that's not possible, right? It's way too complicated. So this is where collective intelligence comes in, where again, this is relating to this idea of generativity, where I say there's a difference between collected and collective intelligence. Collected intelligence is, you do your thing, you do your thing, you do your thing. 1 + 1 makes. Collective is where there's this, interaction where new things begin to emerge. I say there's some kind of resonance, there's some kind of synergy, and then there's emergence, and unpredictable new things come. So I think that good leaders, the way I say it, and maybe the simplest answer is, the 4 things that I essentially have built this book around is that good leaders have to, first of all, number 1, be an example, right? I've got to be the change I want to see, as Gandhi said. Number 2, express a vision, point the direction. I always like to say that the word leader and leading in English comes, actually, it's one of our few English words that comes from Old English. It comes from a word lethan, which did not mean power or control or anything like that. It just meant to go. And I always like to say, to go anywhere, you need 2 things, right? Minimally, you need a direction to go. I don't have any direction, I'm not going, I don't know where to go. And I need energy. So leaders, they be an example, they express a vision, and then they inspire, right? They influence others into action towards that direction. Now, again, you could say, dictators are leaders that influence by threat, by punishment, etc. Conscious leaders, I like to say, they're going to influence by inspiration, by their own passion, bringing their own passion. So be an example, express a vision, inspire people to action, and then this is where the collective intelligence comes in. Encourage collaboration, encourage team collaboration, group collaboration. So I think those are the things. That's the mindsets that leaders need to have. Be the example. Where are we going? How can I inspire, and how can I, get others to cooperate and collaborate?
Yeah, and if you just think about that for like a nanosecond, you can see how that's a very different approach to some people who are in leadership positions. And,
yes. Yes.
Maybe a bit
Absolutely.
more of let's not go there. So the next two questions, I'm going to combine them.
Okay.
It's about the book Alpha Leadership.
Yes.
Offered a powerful synthesis of systems thinking, NLP, leadership, and strategy, looking back as the concept of alpha leadership evolved in the light of today's challenges. And then the second part of the question is, you mentioned the things you've just mentioned, actually, about cognitive, emotional, and somatic wisdom. How do you think modern leadership, and we were talking about business school being very logical and step by step, one and one makes two. Do you think there's probable resistance? Because it might seem woo-woo or a bit, what are you talking about? It's a bit.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's interesting. So first of all, the first part of the answer is, yeah. I mean, I think all of the things that my co-authors and I were, going over in Alpha Leadership are still absolutely valid. And this idea of anticipate, align, act. I think that's really there. Obviously, the conscious leadership for me then would be sort of a next evolution from there. So of these things we were just saying, and by the way, and this relates to generative change as well, and also part of this notion of conscious leadership. We do say that in terms of this collective intelligence, there's what you might call a field intelligence. So cognitive, somatic, emotional, and then this idea of a sensitivity to, again, an intelligence that is not coming from me, but sort of coming to me,
Skin out type thing.
Yeah. And I mean, and Gregory Bateson used to say that, he used to say that the individual mind, he called it immanent, meaning that it's emergent from the body. But he said, but it's also in the pathways and messages outside of the body, meaning that he said, because our individual mind is like a subsystem in a larger mind. Yeah. And so that's maybe what people call, maybe what they mean by God or by nature, but there is some other intelligence that we are also part of. And I do think that that's another aspect of, this kind of evolution of understanding intelligence, this sort of Batesonian notion that intelligence can be anywhere. It's not just inside of a head. Now the woo-woo part, I mean, so I actually just last week, just over a week ago, in fact, I got back from giving a program on conscious leadership in times of crisis for a business school, ADEC, ADHEC, which is it's based in France. It's an international business school. This was for their executive MBA program, and I think the way that I present it, I mean, the concepts themselves, who knows? People can find anything, as you say, woo-woo, but I think the way you present it and you give people experience of it and you back it up, it's kind of like you were saying, Tony. If it works, it works.
Well, yeah.
And so I think you get people's attention because it's like, oh, this actually works. So yeah.
There is more than numbers to life.
Yes. And I think, part of what NLP has always done is you're always pushing the frontiers. And I think, this is a mindset shift that we absolutely need today, is that, hopefully all future intelligence won't just simply be artificial intelligence, that there will actually be
yes, please.
human intelligence involved, which comes from a completely different place. It's not just a synthesis of a bunch of, stuff that's already out there. I mean, not that I'm not knocking AI. I mean, I find myself, impressed by a lot of the applications, but I also find myself, I find it, how do I say, I think it's also, in some ways, you could say in some ways scary, also in some ways lacking, because I don't get the feel of, there can't actually be any real emotional intelligence in it, because it's a basis. So
yeah.
Anyway, yeah, I think so. I think that this notion of being able to engage these other intelligences is going to be an important part of our,
I think you're right,
survival.
In your success factor modeling framework, which I'm a huge fan of, it's helped me create the college, you identify patterns of high-performing individuals what have you found most surprising or even counterintuitive in that research? Because I know you've done a lot more
Yeah,
since the course I
lot.
did with you a zillion years ago now with you and your
Yes.
brother, John.
Yes. Most surprising. Um, I would say kind of in a sense for just what in a way, just what we were talking about, that
Yeah.
these people actually don't have these biases. They're actually really open-minded, right?
They're open to that idea.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. They're actually, I mean, and I would say the other thing, maybe there's another thing about it, because one of the things, and I don't know how much we were emphasizing this, Tony, when you were doing it, but these days I talk a lot about this dynamic between we were speaking about holons a bit ago, between what I call ego and soul. And again, ego is what I want for me, and soul, it has, so ego, I don't mean Freud, I just mean me as a
Right.
unique individual. I've got to take care of myself. I have to have some sense of survival, control, benefit. Soul is not religion, but it's I'm part of something bigger to which I contribute, to which I serve. And you've got these two sides that we're always balancing, myself, self, and the system. Like I was talking about with my mom, all those
Yeah.
years
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I have found is that, so first of all, to be a successful person, you got to have a big ego. I don't mean be narcissistic, but you got to have a big ego. You got to believe in yourself. And
Yeah, for
usually,
sure.
what keeps them from being narcissistic is that they have an equally big vision. So and they're actually humbled by their vision. so it's like this vision is something that it's not about them, and that they're in service of it. But then that
Yeah.
big strong ego then is
Gotta get
necessary for
forward.
that vision.
Take
Um,
forward.
which again I find missing in a lot of, as we were saying, some political leaders and things, where it all is about ego and benefit of for me and those loyal to me.
Yeah.
So that's where it becomes interesting. But
Yeah.
again, the thing that I find about the highly successful people is, first of all, this willingness to think outside of the box, and then to have this balance where there's they're how do I say it? The the ego is given purpose by this bigger vision.
Yeah. I mean, of all the trainings I've ever done, and God knows I've done so much, singularly, and I say this without, sounding a bit lame, the success factor modeling, that year of training with you and your brother certainly changed me forever and was probably the most significant influence on how I saw opportunity, the world, the idea
Right.
that we could actually build a college.
Yeah.
So, I'm always talking about it. Right, let's
Well,
get through some of the I know
I'm
we've
so
gone over time.
so glad that's what we did it for. It's exactly.
Yeah, well, good. Um, your logical levels model, so again, something we love here, has
Mhm.
become a cornerstone for many coaches and change agents. In what ways do you see this framework being most effectively applied in modern leadership, coaching, and where do you think maybe the potential is being underutilized?
Yeah. Well, actually, I literally just finished a program this last weekend on the focus just on using the different levels. And it was an advanced program. It was a sort of a second 3 days. And one of the things I was saying is I think that levels can be applied. Basically, the way we were using it was, right, you can use it for problem solving, you can use it for planning, you can use it for modeling. And so, and you can go from top down, you can go from bottom up. And one of the other interesting things is that, and maybe this is part of my answer, is that if you start combining the levels with other distinctions, right? So one thing is you put the levels on a timeline, right? So you have what you might call the score model, or, present state, desired state, which levels are here, which levels are here, which levels of resources do you need? Then if you start mapping these levels where you have not only a timeline, but you start looking at in NLP, we might say these different perceptual positions: first position, second position, third position, and using the levels on each of those, you begin to have a very again, by just sort of combining these levels with other distinctions, you start to get more and more applications, and begin to see how the levels are I mean, in a certain way, we'd say they're part of everything. Everything you do is falling somewhere in these levels or in some combination. And so being able to track that, I think is extremely helpful. Now, what I would also say is working, the whole notion of the levels is working at the higher levels is going to give you greater leverage. And so I sometimes think that that starting there and developing from there could help them to become used better by coaches, leaders.
Okay.
So yeah, and this is even what we do with success factor modeling. We tend to start with the higher levels. What is your vision? What is your mission? What is your vision? So then the rest sort of falls into place from there. So,
well, Robert, I do remember, we're in that training, whatever it was, conference center in London. And you stood behind me and you put your hand on my shoulder and you said, "What is the vision, Tony?" I went, "Oh my God." And it was kind of that, oh yeah, I need to have some direction. It's this.
Yes. That was the Polish center, as I recall.
Yeah, it was the Polish center. You're right. Yeah. Yeah, we had the celebration thing at the end with the band. It was great.
That's right.
So, looking forward, what are you currently working on that excites you the most? You mentioned some books, but what else is going on?
Everything. No. So okay. Yeah. I actually am working on 3 books. So one is the Strategies of Genius, Volume 4. One is a book that I've been actually, speaking of ITS and the Polish Center. One I've been kind of working up to for about 15 years with Ian McDermott on this notion of fellowship that we've been developing.
Oh yes, yeah.
It is quite interesting because it has to do with a form of collaboration. And then the third book is on the success factor modeling for effective healthcare. So one of the things, I actually started it before the pandemic, but then the pandemic really made it, something an important focus. So taking this, the idea of success factor modeling, what's the difference that makes a difference, and looking at the whole, not just at doctors or hospitals, but the whole, sort of healthcare ecosystem, and coming up with a model for that and a whole training, skill set and assessment, etc. Wow. So I'm excited about a lot of the things. Like I've been talking about combining things. So, one of my recent books, some of my recent books are on the generative coaching, which we've talked about, on the power of mindset change, which is related to a tool, an online inventory that kind of helps people to assess different aspects of their mindset. And we're actually, tomorrow, we're launching what we call a mindset school, which is people take what we call a mindset health scan. And it sort of tells you where your strengths are, where your areas for development could be, and then helps you to develop those. And I think that's something I think is super useful. And then, the third recent book was on the sleight of mouth too, when I was talking about sleight of mouth earlier. But I've been doing things like combining sleight of mouth with strategies of genius is very interesting. So I'm excited about sort of these new combinations of things that synergize. Yeah. And of course, the other things I just, by the way, finished putting together, recorded 35 video masterclasses for our success factor modeling next generation entrepreneur online certification. So it's where we have a dashboard.
Highly recommend to anybody watching because it changed my life. It can change yours too, and it works.
And we're going to launch that along with what we call our SFM community platform, where we have It's a platform where we want to have people who have been through SFM, who are entrepreneurs like you, have a place where you can go to interact with others or like-minded people who have vision. Where we are going to be we have free articles, podcasts, and videos that we're going to be populating this with every month. And we're going to then also have a sort of a paid section where people can come to master classes, mastermind groups, things like that. So, these are, and I am working, speaking of artificial intelligence, I have been working on what I like to call robot DILTs, which is basically an AI assistant, so people could go up, for example, we fed all the SFM books in there, Tony. And so you could go up and ask it questions about SFM, and it would, give you answers. So this is, I think we're trying to use a little bit of, stay modern.
That sounds exciting as well. So yeah, I'll be watching out for that. And of course, it's the 50th anniversary, and I know you're having a big soiree in California.
So this is another thing we're excited about, and we're actually having in about an hour, I'm going to be starting we're having a webinar on what we're going to be doing, and there's the three programs that lead up to the event, and then the 6-day event itself. So we have our trainer training, master trainer training, and the success factor modeling program are all sort of simultaneously leading up to this in August. And so August 19th to 24th, we have the 50th anniversary event, which is hybrid, so people can join. UC Santa Cruz is, it's the mecca of NLP, and it's beautiful.
Yeah.
To go.
I know. I must.
But yeah, we're going to have people from, obviously there will be developers trained. Judith Delosier and I, of course, will be there. And we're going to have lots of trainers and people that have been making developments from all over the world be there. And we'll sort of be looking at the idea is kind of looking at NLP past, present, future. So, a lot of people now, there's an interest in where it came from, because it's, that kind of gets lost. And of course, will be where it came from. And then there's the present, which all the amazing things that people are been doing with NLP, and sort of looking at that, like these applications in healthcare and other places. And then, of course, the next part is the future. Where do we go from here? And how do things like AI fit into this? And what is yet to be modeled? And so I think it's going to be a super rich event. And I'm clearly, it's one of my things that I'm excited about. So
I can tell. Well, look, I've taken up twice as much time so you've been extremely generous.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for the great questions, and you're such a great listener too.
Oh well, thanks. So look, on behalf of the team here at the college, UKCPD, we want to thank you for this today, but also for your inspiration, your wisdom, and I will say for your mentorship. I know you probably don't, because we don't see as much of each other as possibly I would like. I don't know about you, but I do sort of still see you as a mentor for me and for where the college is going and the things that are important to us about making, building a world that people want to belong to. That never leaves my conscious sort of thought in a way. So thank you for that. Give my regards to Judith Delosier. Also very fondly in my thoughts. She had a big impression on me and how I sort of sort things out in my head when I was doing my master practitioner all those years ago. I'll remember that very fondly. It was beautiful. So Robert, thank you very, very much. Wishing you every success and happiness, and hello to Deborah as well, of course.
Thank you.
Your lovely wife. Yes. And hopefully we'll catch up again in the near future very soon.
Yes, absolutely, Tony. Anytime. Truly, anytime. Thank you.
Fantastic. Okay, so there you are. I'm sure you enjoyed that. I know I did, and we've had loads and loads of positive feedback. So if you have enjoyed this particular recording, do let us know. It's 50 years of NLP that we'll be celebrating in the next month or so. So we'll be doing a lot of things on the website as well. So be sure to check some of that out if you're interested in that sort of thing, which I think most of you who listen to this podcast probably are. Alrighty, that's probably enough for this episode. Take care of yourselves, and I will catch you on the next podcast. Till then, keep on smiling. Bye for now.